Great. Speech starts on next word. Selflessness is an unrealistic narrative that causes more harm than good. It is what causes the villainization and exploitation of minorities. And we say that self-sacrifice is incredibly extreme and makes people a lot more materialistic and makes our society a lot worse. I want to do a couple things in this speech. Firstly, I'll be talking about the glorification of selfishness, and secondly, setup, and thirdly, then, two constructives. The first on why this causes philanthrocapitalism, and the second on why this harms marginalized communities, and our second speaker will be giving the principle. Firstly, then, what is the actual glorification of selflessness? It looks like being told that it is inherently good for you to be selfless, and if you're selfish, then you are seen as a bad person as a direct result of the negative actions you took. But this looks like also donating to charities, and you're seen as a good person because that in itself is a selfless action. But note here, selfish people are villainized because it is seen as being incredibly bad. This looks like homeless people living on the street being called selfish for simply trying to survive because they're unable to donate to other people, given the fact that they actually need to get food themselves, able to live. And note here is that receivers of the selfless donations are going to be considered quite selfish. We think that in itself is incredibly harmful. Next, why is selflessness going to be very extreme? It is firstly, people echo pressures to do so where any action could be an icon of a person's character, and that also means there's going to be constant pressure. As long as someone is watching, they will continue to judge you, so that's to say you always need to be selfless. It also looks like donating money to people, where it's going to be the easiest and most acceptable option to prove that you are indeed selfless. And I want to clear up our stance here. We do think it is good to be selfless, but that it doesn't automatically make you a good person, so we think there shouldn't be any pressures. Our goal simply is to keep others around us happy, and you don't need to sacrifice yourself to do it. That trade-off is incredibly extreme. First argument on philanthrocapitalism. Why does this occur? Is that firstly, people only donate just to be selfless for PR or to be seen as a good person. This looks like large corporations or wealthy donors that are quite greedy and exploitative. This looks like the monopolies that try to make the most amount of money possible, like Apple, Google, or Microsoft. And these companies view donation as something they have to do for people to continue buying their products. The reason why then they have bad incentives is because they don't actually care for the other people they're donating. They just are forced to donate because they care about the way that people actually look at them. Which is to say, they don't value the people they donate to, they take advantage of their vulnerability. Note that this is quite exploitative, given that you don't genuinely care for these people. And we do think donation is great, but this donation is literally throwing money at organizations, probably charities, without any concern for their actual well-being. Why does the donations actually go to charity then? It's because charity is the most and easily accessible way to actually donate things, given that these corporations are probably quite lazy and they don't have incentives to go out to more developing countries and fix like infrastructure there. They're probably just going to donate to a charity that says that they'll help there. Why are charities so ineffective then? Is that firstly, they take a long time to allocate resources, which is to say they're not actually going to effectively help people on the ground. Is that secondly, charities have a lot of scandals in the past. And given that they're probably getting a somewhat large donation, maybe like $1 million, some large corporations or CEOs of these large corporations, then they are incredibly likely to be profit driven now, even if they were before not profit driven, which is to say then they're going to use that money and they're going to be really greedy and blinded by it, and they think that, look, I can just keep some of this for myself. But thirdly, charities themselves oftentimes just don't solve the root of the problem because they have things like mismanagement, lack of funds, or even like perverse incentives, which is to say then charities also get greedy. Oftentimes, then, large corporations or general people like influencers with a lot of power use donations as a front to cover up their bad actions because they donate to fit this narrative. And because of that, then, when you see someone donating, you think that, wow, this person is such a great person. But in reality, they're doing a lot more things like exploiting people. And we think that principally this is incredibly bad. Is that why is it better on our side? It's that people on our side just don't donate to fix narratives. They donate out of the good of their own heart. And note that the reason why people are going to donate is because they have a strong sense of justice and empathy. And they aren't going to simply donate to charity on our side of the house. Rather, they will likely do more hands-on work when they actually feel the need to pursue their passions instead of thinking, well, I could just donate to charity and have this thing be done. This looks like Princess Diana going in person to help AIDS patients rather than passively donating. That's to say, then, we are able to access better change for vulnerable people on our side of the house. But secondly, people develop a hero complex because they think they're going to be the ones to help these vulnerable communities simply by donating. And people feed into this hero complex by telling them, well, you're such a great person. This feeds into their ego, which makes it so that they tend to surround themselves with yes men, which means then they're unable to be held accountable. This looks like people like Mr. Beast, who very clearly hid behind the mask of just donations, and people thought he was a really great guy, but in reality, it turned out he was faking all his videos and just doing it for the money. That is something that we actively go against. On our side, we were able to create a lot less pressure for people to engage with these donations, and you're able to actually just see who is genuinely caring and respecting of the people, and instead of questioning the incentives behind their donations, rather we have a better sense of assurance on our side of the house. People feel more happy when they engage in philanthropy because they don't feel like they're forced to do it or forced to donate into large organizations they might question that are relatively ineffective. On our side is that people donate to be happy. Sure, it might be selfish, but it helps others. They genuinely care about them, and they want to see those people happy, which also makes them happy. Second argument on why this helps marginalized communities. The poorest people tend to be poor because of systemic oppression and lack of generational wealth. This looks like ethnic minorities, where in white people they have things like generational wealth, which makes them a lot richer than, for example, black people, who are oftentimes systematically oppressed by the people at the top. That's to say, then it's incredibly hard as a minority to break things like the poverty cycle. Why does this actually help minorities then? That firstly, people focus way too hard on being selfless. This looks like economic minorities thinking about how they need to support their friends in order to not be seen as evil, given the fact that they have hearts, they want to be seen as good people to some extent. This leads them then to thinking they are villains for taking up resources from other people or giving to, and this leads them to giving too many resources away, which actively harms them. In this case, we would argue that being selfish is actually a necessity and that people will generally look down upon you if you're selfish. This means then minorities put a lot of pressure on themselves. It's incredibly bad for their mental health, especially when they're already incredibly vulnerable. It's just bad for their finances, but also in general for mental health. Secondly, is that marginalized communities just become dependent on donations and people that they think are their heroes, which is to say they continue to remain poor. They think that these people are helping them simply by giving money, maybe out of kindness, but in reality, the money is not enough to help them, given the fact that these people are told a naive narrative and they're lied to by saying, like, well, we're going to give you money, this is going to help you. Money isn't enough when people like minorities need systems like education to get them out of their current financial situation. So that's to say, getting $10,000 is not enough for them to actually get better lives. Why are we able to beat any claim from side op? It's that it's even worse when people get money that's inefficiently allocated, because giving money to people just doesn't directly solve an issue. Donations of $1 million are not enough to build schools in developing countries. Splitting it to homeless people in an area may only give that person 10K. That means they still can't buy a home on either way. It's also that people feel a lot worse since they don't really think they deserve this money because they think that they're villains. It is better on our side because you try to be a good person and make the others around you happy, which shows you care for them instead of doing it because you need to. This also means that we're able to have initiatives like building homeless shelters and actually solving the root issues of the problem. On that basis, we are incredibly proud to propose.
I thank the speaker for their fine remarks, calling upon the first speaker from side opposition.
Hello, am I audible?
Yep, you're audible.
Okay. Let me set up my timer. I will start in 3, 2, 1. Government is softlining their entire case because you realize that everything they say is most literally selflessness. This debate is not a debate judging if charities are positive or not. Charities exist on both sides with the same look, and there is nothing different. This debate is a value judgment of selflessness being glorified or not in society, which government have failed to engage thus far. Now, my speech today will be very simple. Firstly, two responses on number one, in genuine donations, and number two, actual physical help. And after that, moving on to a few layers of setup. Then after that, two arguments on number one, the macro level being benefited, and also the influence of people which are likely to get more powerful figures to actually help as well. Now, first on framing, right? What does selflessness actually look like? It looks like recognizing the importance of others and actually helping them. This means that you put the needs of others over yourself. But this is something we'll be clarifying on later on as well. Is that people allow themselves minor inconvenience for the sake of other people. It looks like levels of selflessness being glorified is likely to be palatable. For example, donating to a GoFundMe organization. But then next, what does glorification uniquely achieve? We tell you that it makes society view helping others as an act of greatness. It means that people are more likely to push others to do such acts as well. Now, important clarification here. Note that you cannot tell us that people screw themselves over. You cannot tell us that, oh, people go broke because they donate all their money to poor people, because people have the natural instinct to survive. And even if you don't buy this, right, people can feel starvation and are likely to be kept in check by people around them. If they donate all their money to the point where they have no roof over their head, to the point where they are starving day in, day out, people have this cognitive ability to tell that they are doing something wrong. They have the cognitive ability to tell that they must stop donating to such a high level to be able to at least give themselves basic necessities. And we tell you, insofar as we prove that, we do not mind any other levels of donation insofar as these people actually do not harm themselves. Because we tell you the bottom line is that people have the natural instinct to survive and will not go overboard. Now, how it is more likely to manifest is people going out of their way more to help others. It's not just like donating their entire life savings. It means that selfish needs make people buy into selflessness. Because if I help someone now, someone later will probably help me later. Because when glorification of selflessness actually happens in status quo, we tell you that everybody is likely to buy into it, which is something we'll be proving later, which means that people on the street, not just because of the glorification, but because they are selfish, they want to be benefited too, they will help others. Because they know, I help someone today, someone else will help me another day. Now, next, what is the comparative on-site government, right? Note that how people have the inherent incentive to accumulate wealth for their own enjoyment and to avoid confrontation for the sake of their own safety. It looks like, right, if someone was fighting on the street, I would probably not intervene because I do not want to be harmed in the process. But then how is this selflessness likely to manifest in our world? We tell you, right, that people are likely to donate to other charity organizations. People are likely, for example, they see a homeless man on the street, they're likely to stop, they're likely to buy them food. And also, if let's say my friends were fighting at school with some gangsters, I'm likely to intervene to try to stop the fight. It is because I want to achieve this level of peace and this level of selflessness, which I'll be inserting myself into the situation. You need to defend a world where the average person is unlikely to go out of their way to help others. This uniquely happens outside government because I do not understand, without this glorification, why people are likely to help others here. Now, yes, sure, some billionaires and MNCs still donate for the sake of their reputation, but on the macro level, it is totally non-existent. Because I tell you, right, government have been extremely confusing here. When they tell us, right, people assist others only to enhance their personal agenda of them looking up on them. I think this is the main push coming from side government thus far. And we tell you, right, we do not care if people donate just for the sake of their own reputation, because people are benefited anyways. If you donate to the Salvation Army just because you want to boost your company's reputation, at least the children at Salvation Army are able to live another day. At least they do not suffer from starvation because you're helping them at the end of the day. And right, government also try to push this funny idea, which literally squirrels that die debate. They try to tell us, oh, on our side, we want actual real help. We want people like Princess Diana actually going to these places to help people. But I tell you, what is the likelihood of this actually manifesting on your side? Because I tell you, without the glorification, why would people even have the natural incentive to want to help people? We tell there needs to be a push in status quo, and when the only push you come there is no push from your side onto why people are actually incentivized to help others, you will not take this debate. Because I tell you, on our side, even on a small level, people are incentivized to help others because they want to look good. You cannot tell me that just because they want to look good, this help is negative. Because the poor person getting one plate of rice is a net positive, which is something you cannot argue against. But now, my arguments are very simple here. Before I move on, any POIs? 3, 2, yep.
POI.
Yes.
On your side of the house, your selflessness literally turns into selfishness where you donate because you want to better yourself. That is literally
I
selfishness.
told you it doesn't matter, right? Because if I donate to a homeless man in the hope that my girlfriend sees me as a positive person, it literally doesn't matter. Yes, I feel good. My girlfriend sees that I'm an amazing person, but at the end of the day, the homeless person at the side of the street gets a meal. Where is that homeless person supposed to get a meal on your side? I completely do not understand what you're trying to tell me. Now, people, right, on the macro level here, my first argument, we tell you are likely to be benefited. How does this actually look like? It looks like, number one, a homeless person being showered with money and food by passerbys, and number two, it looks like instead of recording a fight, people are actually intervening to stop street fights. The impacts of this are very clear. People who actually need assistance are given assistance, and no one is left behind, because individuals with the capacity will now go out of their ways to help others. I do not care what their incentive is. It's just because that's glorified, it means that people are going to do this. The comparative on your side, right, is that people who are struggling get totally screwed over, because I do not see any way where you're able to assist these people when the glorification does not exist, because you have not given us a counter model. The bottom line is, for whatever reason, the homeless person on the street will be benefited. The person will not be going starving for the next few days. Now, my second argument on how people are likely to pressure others into committing selfless acts, right? Because the reason is very simple. Being selfless is seen as the ultimate good to society. No matter what you do, insofar as you help others, you are seen as the amazing person in society. It means that people expect that everyone should be helping others. And the societal norm is to assist when the need arises and to understand the plights of others. How is this pressure likely to look like? It looks like, for example, Taylor Swift Taylor Swift fans pressuring her to publicly support Palestine. It means that Taylor is expected to post on Instagram probably about donating to Palestine, and she herself is expected to donate to Palestine as well. Yes, this pressure exists when glorification happens, because the average person, when they do not see their idol doing such acts of greatness, they are likely to pressure them into committing such things too. And we tell you the impact here is very clear, is that the influence from these people make others help in larger extents, because these individuals, for example, Taylor Swift and these billionaires, have high social capital. It means that they are able to assist others on a bigger scale. The bottom line is here, right? When the glorification of selflessness actually happens, the average person expects that every person is supposed to be selfless. It means that every person they see around their community, they're likely to pressure them, and even internet celebrities will be tied into this. This means that people with high social capital are also likely to be tied into this, and it means that people are likely to donate more, and people in the end are able to be benefited on the ground. Thank you.
I thank the speaker for the fine remarks, calling upon the second speaker from side proposition. Prop 2. Proposition second speaker.
Oh, sorry. I was muted. That's my fault. Okay. My time will start on my first word. Sorry, that's my fault. The end impact in this debate is not necessarily that a homeless person is able to get food. The end impact in this debate that side proposition is exclusively able to bring to you is that we are actually having an environment where people are willing to create systematic changes, and we win on that clash being the most marginal. For example, if black people will always like help by like white people to escape slavery, then they're actively glorifying them as sort of heroes to them. When in reality, they're probably the reason there is an issue in the first place. And so it's not like, it's not really actually encouraging any systematic changes, which is actually the root cause of all issues that opposition brings up, right? They never address the entire case on marginalized communities and why necessarily it'll be infinitely worse on their side. We also never mentioned, people, donating their entire life savings. Our case is more so and more so about on like winning on OO's own grounds about the very small things, right? Very simple speech. Firstly, I'm going to provide an extension on why necessarily this is principally coercive and why that's harmful, and then do some rebuilding, weighing, as well as refutation, which will mostly be implicit. Okay, on to my extension on why probably there is an element of coercion and why this is intuitively harmful. The fact that this is something that's glorified means that it is a narrative that, this is something that's virtuous or the right thing to do. So the people that do choose to do not engage with this, note Jennifer's speech is very important, is that these people will probably be villainized by society. So there's a certain element of social pressure for you to actually choose to engage to do so, right? Note the very important piece of framing. It's very easy to become that for these like small acts to become the icon of a person's character. If you see your friend donating, then it's very easy for you to think that this person is intuitively a good person for sure. And if you see that someone not donate, then you might think that that person is a bad person. Okay, so given that there is some elements of social pressure, it's very easy to be pressured into things that actually harm you, right? I.e., if you want to help a friend with, like for example, like a task or something, even though you have a test to do tomorrow, you're probably pressured socially into to actually helping your friend with the task instead of studying for your own test. The only reason why I'm doing quote unquote good in opposition's world is because socially pressured, social like there's like social pressure that's acting upon me. Nobody in like just wakes up and decides that I'm going to take sacrifice my own benefit to do something good. So there's no actual true altruism in this case then. So probably does not actually provide a ground by which systematic issues can actually be addressed. This also sort of dilutes the actual purpose of kindness by sort of like downplaying personal worth, right? The entire definition, no thank you, of whatever it's called, like the selflessness by opposition's own terms is to actually go out and minorly inconvenience yourself for the sake of others. That is to say, you're probably less likely to stand for personal values. I think this is harmful on 3 levels. Firstly, there's probably innate harm done to the individual. I think this is very intuitive and that opposition literally concedes themselves. I think to a point, they're probably not going to donate their life savings, but it's still probably going to be detrimental to like happiness, right? We're probably going to have less happiness on our side of the house. Like imagine a baseball game. If you catch a home run like a ball and a kid was also trying to do it, you probably have a certain amount of social pressure, especially with the cameras pointing at you, to give it to the kid. You probably don't want to give it to the kid. And the kid will probably not be sad on our side of the house because there is no glorification. That means there is no expectation that the kid has that you'll give it to him. Therefore, you'll probably just go on with its day. So if it doesn't, there probably is no expectation, right? Secondly, systematic oppression is unlikely to be changed because the fact that you're less likely to blame misfortune on others. The entire point is that you are more likely to value others over yourself. That's more likely to blame your own troubles on yourself, which is probably the case, right? On like many like sources of like many of the bad misfortunes that people have gone through is not necessarily the issue of their own, but more so the environment and other people doing systematic harm. And therefore, people are less willing to fight. Things like Black Lives Matter or colonialism is probably not going to be as strong. Thirdly, there's probably going to be toxic altruism. This is not a true form of altruism. I think that's intuitively a bad thing, right? Sort of a harmful narrative like to do good you must harm yourself. Note that this probably also addresses the entire opposition case about like final impact is that we have a net gain, right? The fact is that there's probably better ways to go about this without necessarily you sacrificing yourself, but people tend to overlook this because there's a narrative going on that you have to necessarily harm yourself in order to do good. That's probably not the true, right? That's probably not true. There's probably like incentive to donate from like systematic ethics and of compassion. There's probably going to still exist systems like that whereby people actually have an incentive to still do good, right? Like take the entire case about them talking about people getting into street fights, for example. People still probably have systematic ethics. People don't want to see people getting beat up. That's not out of kindness. That's out of the fact that I have some sort of humanity within me, right? So in this case, people will probably not jump into the direct conclusion of throwing themselves into danger and possibly getting their knee broken, but rather to actually find better solutions that doesn't necessarily need to be heroic in a sense, because that heroism and putting yourself at risk is what is being glorified. I.e., look telling a teacher, or much better solutions like that, right? They also talk about why necessarily like net harm is like there's net gain here, right? Note that my partner's case exactly like sort of covers that. They never engage with the fact that this sort of net gain is used to cover up very bad things. There are many organizations that do very horrible things. There are like, YouTubers who do this just for their own gain. Yes, you may argue that perhaps there is some sort of gain to be received, but the issue is there are still people that are being affected negatively. If you do something bad, for example, if you rob, like maybe not rob a bank, but like, okay, for example, like, okay, content warning, this is probably going to address like, yeah, sensitive topics, but like, in the case of Mr. Beast, he was actually like, there was some drama with Ava Chris Tyson and like, his touching kids, right? So like, the fact is that since Mr. Beast is known as someone who's willing to donate, people paint a natural picture that he is someone that is glorified, someone that's intuitively a good person by nature, and people don't want to accept the reality that maybe that's not true. The fact that there are scandals that are being covered up simply due to the fact that people have money. I think this intuitively favors people who have that sort of money, and it's a very easy way to sort of cover up bad things by just simply donating a whole lot of money. I do not think that the net gain sort of outweighs the fact that this is used very poorly in society, right? Even though like the minorities are sort of being compensated, I think principally those minorities should actually receive compensation for some static so I can't speak from systematic issues, and like instead they're actually actively idolizing the people that put them into those places. I think that's also like not addressing the root issue, also a very bad thing, right? They also talk about like recognize the needs of others, and like I don't think they really address most of our case. So we're gonna do some really quick weighing as to like why necessarily this is probably a lot worse on their side, right? Like the incentive that like on what actually creates change, right? The margin that we're actually able to create change on our side of the house is the fact that we're actually able to address the root issues, and we're actually like the fact that it's like principally coercive on their side of the house actively like enhances this. The fact that we're actually able to dive deeper into actually like using systematic ethics to actually decide what's the right thing, whereas on their side they're like only doing the right thing because of the fact that people are watching, and this doesn't actually address the root issue, whereas minorities are also being coerced, and people are also being coerced into thinking that these bad people are very good people, and so they're very unlikely to fight back against the bad things that they've done. Very proud to I think propose.
I thank the speaker for their fine remarks. Calling upon opposition second speaker.
Hello, am I visible and audible?
You're not audible properly. If possible, can you try moving closer to the mic?
Is this volume better?
Yeah, this is much better. Thank you.
Okay. I'll take POS both verbally and in the chat. I don't really mind. Pronounce she, her. Yeah. Let me set up my timer. I'm sorry I'm not pretty enough to be Princess Diana, but it doesn't mean that I cannot do a net good. Just because I'm not Princess Diana and I don't have the means to fly to Bangladesh and help the poor kids, it doesn't mean that I don't have the means to donate to a GoFundMe. So proud to oppose. 3 things I need to do then. First, a few direct responses to DPM's case. Secondly, then a clarification on what the clarification will actually bring. Thirdly, as to 2 new arguments then. Firstly, then on some responses, right? They tell you that the societal narrative is going to coerce people into doing bad things. My first speaker already preempted this very clearly. He tells you that when the societal narrative is to be selfless, it means that people are going to donate, right? But it also doesn't mean that I, as a person who earns a 5,000 ringgit salary, I'm going to donate like 4,900, right? No, I likely would not. What I'm likely to do then is I'm likely to donate to like Palestinian GoFundMes. I'm likely to go to the Salvation Army. I'm likely to go to the soup kitchen and help out or give them money to buy better food, stuff like that. That is the type of selflessness that is going to exist when glorification happens, right? Because you understand that it's precisely when you glorify it and you let people know that selflessness is a very good thing and it's like the most morally right thing to do, that is when they have the incentive to want to do good, right? Know that if you know that if you don't give people the incentive to think that selflessness is a good thing, these benefits cannot manifest. The second thing they try to tell you then is that to do that companies try to cover up bad things by doing things like donations, right? Two things in response. Number one is that this is a very, very minority case, and that sure, even if companies donate to poor people just to cover up the fact that they are using fossil fuels or something, we tell you that there is still a net gain to be done. Secondly, then, is that it's precisely when the narrative of selflessness exists that more people are willing to call them out selflessly. They're willing to be called out by the company because they call them out, right? For example, Mr. Beast, Chris will call Mr. Beast out for being assaulted or something. I don't know what happened with them, but yeah, because of the narrative of selflessness, people now will call them out because they are selfless and they believe just what is morally right, and they will opt into it, right? The third thing they try to talk to you then is on the systemic issues, and that poor people are poor and that we cannot help it with selflessness, right? Two things. Number one, you also don't prove how you're going to help poor people anyways. I don't understand, right? You said that also systemic issues still exist and it is not good. How do you solve systemic issues on your side of the house when selflessness does not exist? If people don't have the incentive and people are not willing to help each other out,
You know why?
where this incentive comes from. Secondly, is that the only way you're going to be able to solve systemic issues is by creating a sense of collectivity, and that only exists with selflessness. But before I get into clarifications, I'll take your point.
The margin here is that we're actually able to actually have people see what the actual issue is. The fact that people more value their own values, and so therefore they're more likely to fight for their own values.
Even if they fight for their own values, when a net gain is being received, that is still a good thing. You have to prove to us why a homeless person getting a meal, why soup kitchens getting more funding is a bad thing, right? And we tell you that even if my incentive is to look good in front of my boyfriend, why do I care? Insofar, why should you care? Insofar as poor people can still access money and food. So two clarifications then. Firstly, on the check and balances that you get from glorifications can see your face, and secondly, on how this glorification is actually going to be palatable for the people on the ground. So firstly, on check and balances, then is that when you glorify something, is that the awareness that goes towards it and the people talking about it and the discourse surrounding it is likely to increase. Think about famous people, right? The more famous you get, the more people are trying to hold you accountable, right? So this means when selflessness is something that's extremely glorified, it means that people will have discourse around it. They'll understand, they'll try to discuss what is the best way to be selfless, etc., etc. That only exists with glorification. What you have to defend is a world where this glorification does not exist and that these checks and balances do not exist. So that is to say, awareness for people pleasers and stuff like that exists solely on our side of the house when you bring discussion and discourse to this topic, right? You cannot co-opt that benefit. Secondly, then, as to how glorification is likely going to be palatable and accessible. For example, selflessness, like me donating $5 to a Palestinian GoFundMe, is likely to be seen as something that's morally good and something that makes me an inherently selfless person. This means that even with the glorification of selflessness, it is still somewhat accessible. People can still somewhat be a selfless person without harming themselves, because that is the narrative that exists in status quo. Proposition cannot tell us that, actually selflessness is a very bad thing. People cannot access it. When we tell you very clearly in status quo that the glorification of selflessness has brought to you so many ways that it can be done properly, it can be done accessibly, and it can be done well. Before I move on to substantives, I'll take another point. 3, 2, 1, lack of engagement. Two things I want to clarify. Then, firstly, what is the need for the glorification of selfishness? And secondly, what is the net gain that you get on a personal scale and a macro scale? Firstly, then, on the need for glorification. The need for glorification stems from the fact that all the benefits that you get from people being selfless can only exist when people have the incentive to do good. We tell you two things very clearly. Number one is that the incentive for people to do good only exists when you glorify it. For example, if I know that I'm going to pull more ladies by being a selfless person and donating more money, then I'm more incentivized to donate. And it's fine even if my incentives are inherently selfish, because I see him as a selfless person and I'm doing selfless deeds, and that is the bottom line that we want, right? We want these selfless needs and impacts from selfless deeds and donations and people helping out and volunteering. Those are the impacts that we want. And even if your incentives to do so aren't as good, we say it's fine, insofar as we prove to you why people have people want to opt into doing those good deeds anyways. You have the burden to prove to us why these selfless deeds, including people donating, including people benefiting other people, you have to prove to us why there is a net harm. Secondly, then, what is the impacts of the glorification of selflessness? Two things. Number one is people end up holding each other accountable on like doing selfless deeds, and this applies explicitly and like especially for the rich and the most privileged, right? For example, people holding Taylor Swift and Lizzo accountable. Lizzo is a plus size woman. People expect her to be selfless and promote plus size people as well, to not fat shame and do things like that. Accountability only exists with glorification of selflessness because people want to be seen as an inherently good person, so they ask other people to do inherently good things as well. Second thing then is that the personal benefits that you get from being a selfless person. This looks like ethical egoism. I feel like a good person when I donate because that is inherently what I feel like, right? For example, if I see that a Palestinian kid gets food because I choose to donate to like the UNICEF or something, right? Then I feel like a good person because I donated $5, and yet that $5 helped the kid to have a meal. That $5 helped somebody buy dinner, right? It makes you feel good, and that is a net benefit, right? All the harms that proposition tries to push to you does not exist insofar as you prove to you two things. Number one, why the feeling that you get when you do a good deed and you are selfless is going to offset it anyways. Like me feeling good that I donated a piece of bread to a homeless person, me feeling good that I donated $5 to the Salvation Army. Second thing then is that even if they want to argue on the extremist scale and tell you that this glorification is actually going to lead to people doing things out of their like limits and out of their capacities, right? We tell you that this won't exist because the more that something is glorified, the more checks and balances will exist for it, the more accessibility will get if you do so choose to glorify it, right? Understand that these benefits are exclusive to glorification on two fronts. Number one is that precisely when glorification exists, there's when more people are aware about it and more people can actually have discourse surrounding it, more people can actually bring awareness to it. So that means that the benefits that we get, for example, people being able to access being a good person like GoFundMes, only exist when glorification does. Secondly, then this means that whatever they should say as to like being Princess Diana cannot stand because all those actions quite literally are contingent on being a selfless person. Insofar as Proposition's entire case is trying to soft line and try to call our benefits without proving to you how this can manifest, it is a clear upwin here.
Then the speaker for their final remarks, calling upon the third speaker from Proposition.
Give me a minute to set up my timer and organize my notes. Okay, my time will naturally start on my first word. Okay. By the way, POI is in chat. Thanks. I think opposition's main impact is that, there's a net gain for like homeless people because they get more money, and because this material gain, they think they should win this debate. I think this is wrong on a few grounds. I'm going to prove this. There's a few things I'm going to do in my speech. Number one, I want to note at the top of my speech, they pretty much don't listen to our speeches. They don't really listen to our arguments. There's so many mechanisms that they fail to refute. But then I'm going to analyze a few things then. Number one, on the actual incentives of donating apart from glorification, because there are other incentives, such as personal fulfillment, to actually donate. You cannot say that glorification is the only incentive to donate. But then let's weigh the net gain that you get from from donating like $100 billion to homeless people versus how it is morally incorrect due to material gain because these billionaires, these millionaires are donating for public perception reasons. I think this is morally incorrect. We're going to weigh these two arguments. But then lastly, I'm going to take opposition at their best. We get billions of dollars to homeless people. We get billions of dollars invested from these millionaires, these billionaires, to maybe like children's education in a very like suburban, very underdeveloped place. I think even if we take opposition at their best, we still win this debate. First, I would like to note the top of my speech. They don't really listen to our speeches. They don't really listen to our mechanisms. I think their refutation is extremely shallow on a few grounds. Opposition says our arguments are only about selflessness, not the glorification of it.
Here, I would like to bring back the mechanisms that my first speaker has talked about, because this is not our case. Think our case, this is their only response to our first speaker. This is literally not our case. Our case is this: it is morally incorrect to give to the vulnerable for good public relations and higher public perception, because it undermines the self-worth and value of people you donate to, and you use them for material gain. This is exclusive. We've already proven to you multiple times. This is exclusive to philanthropy used for glorification. So we're not opposing the whole entire notion of selflessness. We're simply opposing the notion of glorification of selflessness. We've proven to you multiple times. I don't think I really need to get into this. Okay. Next, I'm going to prove to you the incentives of donating apart from glorification. This is twofold. Number one, it is personal fulfillment. Number one, it is that you get happiness from seeing other people happy, because happiness is contagious. And secondly, it is social connection. First, on happiness from seeing other people happy, because happiness is contagious. The framing for this is very simple. It is that humans have empathy. So when you donate to another person, you're going to personally feel fulfilled. You're probably going to feel better about yourself. You're probably going to feel better about your life. And you're probably going to feel happiness from seeing this vulnerable person that you just donated to be happy. I think this is very simple reason for donating apart from glorification. The second reason is very simple. It is also that social connection. So if I help my friend with a test, I socialize and bond with them. I think social interaction is pretty important to humans. I think humans probably have the incentive to donate to people or help people and be selfless because of social connection and connecting with other people. So opposition cannot say that glorification is the only incentive for selflessness. I think this is a very negative view on life. I think that this is also extremely unrealistic view of the world. But even if you don't buy all the mechanisms that I've already told you, I think second speaker on our side of the house has already told you that even if you buy opposition's premise, that nobody actually wants to perform philanthropy and be selfless, there will be no true altruism. And on that basis, society falls, because nobody does good things for the goodness of their heart. So when nobody will, quote, sacrifice minor inconveniences for others, I will not help my friend to study for their test. I will not help my teammates prep the case for this debate. So there's two things that you need to come out of this. Number one, there has to be other incentives to help people other than glorification. I think this is a pretty big takeaway. And number two, that their entire case is hinged upon this. I think first speaker and second speaker on their side of the house both repeat this multiple times. Okay, moving on to let's weigh. Okay. Let's do net gain versus the morally incorrect due to material gain. This is the quickest way for us to win this debate, because I think this is the major clash this entire round. They say that oh, there's net gain because you donate $1 million to homeless people. We then say that it is morally incorrect because of material gain, because you're taking advantage of the situation of homeless people. You're taking advantage of their vulnerability for public relations and to feel good about yourself. I think that is what's morally wrong about glorification. I say that it is morally incorrect is morally incorrect because it is principally coercive, is that it is principally wrong, because this glorification is usually for a public relations incentive. My team is characterized for this multiple times, and this would cover most rich people's incentives to donate because of public relations incentives. So they're actually getting material gain back from donating to these people who are extremely vulnerable. But let's take a world without glorification. I think in a world without glorification, which is the extreme that we're supporting, but we're probably in, okay, I think this is the most extreme case on our side of the house. I think the most extreme case on our side of the house, without glorification, money is not tainted with material gain. So this means that it is principally wrong because the purpose of selflessness is defeated because the deceptive act of selflessness was for selfish reasons. So selflessness is supposed to be about giving up yourself, maybe from minor inconveniences to maybe giving up years of your life. It doesn't really matter. It's a whole spectrum. There's anything between. So I think the entire notion of selflessness is then destroyed on the rest of the house, because because this selflessness was pretty much like deceptive and only used for personal gain. I'll take a POI.
Why?
3, 2.
What does the principle truly matter as long as we get the practical benefits? Sure, I do selfless acts out of selfish deeds.
Okay, I'm going to talk about this right now. I was about to get into it anyways. We see that the net gain of homeless people, okay, we see that like net gain of homeless people, oh, like they get money is restricted to like the $100 bill they get. I think on their side of the house, this $100 is tainted with the billionaires' PR incentives, the public relations incentives. I think this money is hard and cold and tainted with capitalism. But on our side of the house, this money also represents kindness. Money also represents the good of people's hearts. This money is warm and probably like pretty like kind. I feel like people who get this money from like actual kindness of people's hearts is I think they're going to get more hope for society. We also get practical gain from this principal impact. So there's more hope for society for these vulnerable people who are wanting to give up. They're probably in like a pretty vulnerable position. They probably don't have a very optimistic outlook on life. So when like this billionaire just like suddenly gives them $100, I don't think it's going to impact their mental state very much. Well, let's take opposition at their best, that you get like billions of dollars to homeless people. But these homeless people, these people who are like most vulnerable, I guess, they don't really feel fulfilled. They don't really feel hopeful. I think this kind of like defeats the entire purpose of selflessness. On that basis, so proud to propose.
I thank the speaker for their fine remarks, calling upon the third speaker from side opposition.
Hi, can I check if I'm can I check if I'm audible?
Yep, you're audible.
Okay, thank you. Okay, so I'll be wait, let me set up my timer for a while. Okay, so I'll be receiving POIs verbally, please. Without further ado, I'll be starting my speech in 3, 2, and 1. Panels, insofar as their case is contingent on Mr. Beast without any impacts at all, we don't think they can win in any aspect in this debate then. So here's how I will be structuring my speech, starting off with housekeeping and moving on to two issues that I will be clarifying on in my speech, right? So firstly on housekeeping, on the broad observations is that I have noticed in their case, right? They're actively softlining their case. When you tell us that you help one another, you give us charity. We tell you that the prerequisite of being charity is literally being selfless, meaning that they're still supporting the glorification of it anyway, right? So meaning the second thing that I want to touch on here is the deadlocks in this debate. What is the end goal of this debate, right? So proposition tell you that they want to give people on the ground actual support by giving charity, and they also want to tell you that it's by morally right, it's principally right. Op says everyone is able to benefit, and as long as this benefit manifests, which we have explained in two speakers, we think that is so much better than anything else. So how am I breaking this? Firstly, proposition is debating on the process, right? They have to prove to us why the incentive is good and it's so important to this debate then. But because the net positive is still manifesting, you have to tell us how the principle is good and not just give us one-liners. Okay, it's not morally right, meaning I cannot do this. But even it's not morally right, people will still benefit on the people on the ground. First issue then on personal benefit, right? With the Gulf tells you three things. Firstly, exploitation on two people, companies, and minorities. Secondly, it fits into the ecos. Thirdly, people don't need to be happy, right? Firstly, why is this wrong then? When we glorify selflessness, this looks like a lot of people being raised with the mindset that selfless equals good and must be prioritized, which means it internalizes that into their mind. Therefore, we tell you that a lot of people will already be selfless of their own goodwill of the heart, which therefore renders the principle inconsistency that side of proposition is trying to put onto us to stay false. But then, if we consider that people will only be selfless to fulfill their own interests, we still tackle this point. But how do we tackle this? Two ways. Firstly, on the rich people scale, right? Brother, why is this so bad? There are literally big billionaire companies that will never care about that will never value poorer countries, poorer communities, or other vulnerable stakeholders. But on our side, at least we help them in the first place, right? Because glorification exists. On your side, these stakeholders don't receive any financial help at all because there's no incentive for companies or anybody else to have financially help them, because unless they empathize them, which is only a small demographic of people. However, charities solely being contingent on empathy, so being contingent on empathy, never actually having the incentive, never actually effectively works because it's not as large as an incentive of saving your money. But on our side, the incentive of pressure and protecting our reputation still manages to outweigh the incentive of saving money then, right? So we are the only people that achieve significant impacts for people on the ground. It's obvious we win on by helping vulnerable stakeholders then. Secondly, on the minority, right? We think that the people in the minority will not be stupid enough to like give the entirety of the entire money to the people. We told you in first how they know they are right to, even if it feels bad. The glorification doesn't mean it takes your entire right to do so, right? It suddenly become but becomes this true. This is like just a small minority of people, which we think that it's just more people. If there is just it's in the human nature to defend your own right. If they are coerced, no one will judge a minority for donating. We do not understand the narrative that they are debating on then. Meaning, so unfortunately, they push you an exploitation. We tell you if the glorification of selflessness is widespread, we tell you that the discussion of selflessness in our counterfactual is going to contain lots of resources about how to be selfless without damaging yourself, right? This is because people who take selflessness more seriously are going to be the same people listening to those motivational TED Talks and reading books about it. And we tell you that this discussion about selflessness is no doubt going to spawn how to get to be a selfless person. And we tell you it's obviously that the first step is to have to take care of themselves first, like how we analyzed just now. They have to ensure that their mental and physical is in check, and they can't let anyone other people exploit them, which would also affect them being selfless to other people that aren't exploiting them. In other words, check and balance exists, like what my second speaker has told you. What's the way here, right? In our worst case, even if principally it might be a little messed up that people are of our stakeholders just helping out these people just because it made them feel dignified, we tell you that at least they feel happy because ethical egoism exists. Who cares about the principle of goodwill at the end of the day? It's outweighed by the practical because there's no violation of human rights here. If money represents the kindness of life, aren't you supporting the, selflessness, meaning there's a contention in your place, but selflessness, happiness can be obtained through selflessness. In fact, we can fulfill utilitarian principles of maximizing self-happiness, which is obviously are much more respected and well-known principles. I think it's obvious which principle is the most important to fulfill within this debate. But note, a big question here is what type of ego do you get from selflessness, which is a direct dialogue I'm going to break, right? When this narrative exists, it means that selflessness is normal, meaning it doesn't necessarily mean that other people will congratulate you. It means that it's accepted and status quo. Oh, you are being selfless. That's good. They tell you that the heroic complex is something that they so very want to push, right? But even if they cover up bad things, we tell you that this only happens in a small minority. Come on, Mr. Beast is like 1 in 1,000, 1 in a million or something. It's not like because it's gonna win you the debate, but because it is so obvious that people that selflessness is glorified. If this is found out, that they face even more backlash then. But then we told you, if you feel good donating $1 to the poor, we think that this probably fits into my ego. But if I do feel good though, that's okay too, meaning we can call the benefit too. Finally, on the exploitation point, even if some people sacrifice their personal well-being as a result of exploitation, we tell you that this only applies to a minority of people, since the majority of people are still in tune and rational enough to understand that by letting yourself being exploited, you're literally hurting yourself, which is beyond the definition of helpless, and it's quite obvious that majority of people aren't willing to do that. And two, you're actually decreasing the effectiveness of selflessness by basically destroying yourself until you don't have anything left to give others. Therefore, we win a metric of scale because the majority of people will still receive the benefit. But we also win the metric of exclusivity because the same people that are irrational enough to be exploited are the same people that will buy into other societal narratives that exist in the status quo. Meaning, secondly, on the issue on community benefit here, they tell you that charity sucks and then like philanthropic capitalism and all. We don't get how this analysis even stand, right? This is just a run on the assertion that all charities are inherently bad. All NGOs want to help others because their reputation is on the line, but which is true though. But plus, there's been so many precedents to prove that this point is wrong, like thousands of fundraisers, projects that have given so much help to other stakeholders, and realize that these precedents take place in the status quo where selflessness is not even glorified. But even if there are profit incentivized, the net positive is still there. The people who need this money get it at the end of the day. We told you in second, when the glorification exists, the check and balances will be even far higher. This means that more people will look at Mr. Beast, will look at famous YouTubers and like, we cannot do that. Oh man, the fact that they did this bad thing will always outweigh the fact that they did charities anyway. So secondly, on the systemic changes, they never tell you the counterfactual how they're gonna solve this, but they're pushing it on earth with absolutely no lack of solvency, with a lack of solvency on their side of the house. What's the way here? We told you that celebrities have the incentive to do good, to donate to Palestine, even when it's more, right? But even so, right, why do we win even because we help people on the ground? We are willing to trade off covering up the mistake, the saving complaint, simply because the majority is better than the minority, because it impacts more people, it impacts more and inherently giving be good to more people when this minority are not being panels. If we want to be Superman so bad, I don't understand why it's so bad anyway, if my citizens are safe and sound. So proud to oppose.
I thank the speaker for their fine remarks, calling upon the reply speaker from side opposition.
Hi, am I clearly visible and audible?
Yep, you're audible.
Okay, great. Start. Okay. Unfortunately, an abundance of Mr. Beast back knowledge cannot win you this debate. You win by actually debating debate instead from dancing around it. Three key things I want to do then. Firstly, on clarifying what we did in debate and why we clearly win. Secondly, why is it that proposition's case cannot stand? And lastly then, as to how we're the only side that's able to benefit the people on the ground. Firstly, what did we prove to you then? We proved to you three key things. Number one is that we proved to you how the people on the ground can be benefited, even if the people who help them doesn't inherently have the best interests, right? We say that the principle doesn't matter anyways, because the practical far outweighs it. Two key things. Number one is that people, right, as long as they get benefited, we don't see why the principle of selflessness matters, right? We tell you that the glorification of selflessness only matters so long as the benefits you get from selflessness can matter. So I don't understand why their case stands, because they want everybody to be a Princess Diana. They want everybody to be able to like, oh, fly to Bangladesh and help you hands-on. Money is not enough. I don't understand why the money is not enough if the money directly impacts them. Second clarification then is that they try to push is that opposition tries to push on exploitation. That was one of the largest contentions they try to give to us, and three things we tell you to mitigate it. Number one is that people have the incentive to be selfless, so therefore these corporations are more likely to get called out under side opposition, right? Note that there's no incentive on your side of the house, because your side of the house, the harm of exploitation is very symmetrical. I don't see why corporations cannot be corrupt, cannot be like exploitative on your side as well. This was something that you had to clarify and failed to do so. The delta on proposition is very simple, is that at the very least, when exploitation happens, we get benefits from it owing to the fact that selflessness exists and people have the incentive to want to help by donating and etc. And number two is that when selflessness exists, that is when the incentive to call them out and hold them accountable also exists. So two things that they failed to prove to you then on the proposition. They had the burden to prove to you why inherently being selfless is a bad thing, right? I mean, tell you so very clearly already that the selflessness that is going to exist under opposition is likely to be one that is palatable, likely to be one that is accessible, and likely to be one that is able to benefit the majority of the people on the ground. Note that they cannot co-opt any of these benefits, because the literal burden on them is to defend the outright opposite of glorification of selflessness, right? That is to say, they had to defend a role in which selfishness was the norm, and that people are inherently like prioritizing themselves, right? They failed to do so. They softline their entire case, and they don't engage in anything at all. Then on to the biggest contention on like exploitation versus how which side actually better helps the people on the ground. We tell you that we outweigh this very clearly because of two things. Number one is that the impacts that we get are very direct. We don't wait around for people to grow like the nerve and grow the like incentive to suddenly be a really good Saint Mary and start donating. We don't wait around for that. We give them the impact directly. We donate to them directly, and we help them very, very directly. We don't wait around for like people to grow their own principle, to grow their own morals, because we tell you that it cannot exist if you don't glorify selflessness, if you don't tell people why being selfless is good. Your side has to defend by telling people that being selfless is bad, is inherently not good. Moving on then as to how it's clear that opposition wins debate on three fronts. Number one is that we outweigh proposition on a clear margin when it comes to like practical versus principle, right? We tell you that the principle of it will only matter if practical benefits can manifest. Second thing then is that we actually prove to you why selflessness is a net good and why the impacts of selflessness should be obtained even if the incentives aren't as good. Third thing then is we give you the explicit benefits of accountability once you allow these people to be selfless and you force them to be selfless. And insofar as proposition cannot co-opt any of these benefits, insofar as they try to run away from the burden, it is clear that opposition takes this debate so proud to oppose.
I thank the speaker for their fine remarks. Calling upon proposition reply speaker.
Okay, great. Okay, give me a second to find my timer. Okay, wonderful. Okay. Great. Speech starts on next word. If we had to defend selflessness being bad and not existing, then we would automatically lose, because it is intuitively good to be ethical. Rather, we are defending the fact that selflessness has become warped and turned into things for selfish reasons, and glorifying it is completely counterintuitive, given that people do selflessness for selfish reasons rather than helping others. Note that they completely ignore the third speech and don't engage with any of our material at all, which is to say that opposition has become incredibly uncharitable. The second thing to note is that they are literally strawmanning our case when they don't even listen to our speeches and they just say, well, you said all of these things. I want to talk about two things in the speech. Firstly, I want to talk about the practical. Secondly, I want to talk about the principle, and I want to weigh all these claims then. Firstly then, the practical at best is a wash, because even if you do buy the op case, either way on prop, we still have this practical case. Note that they talk about checks and balances in the third speaker, but you can't credit that because that is a new piece of analysis that comes out and that is incredibly unstrategic to run. The op case goes something along the lines of, minorities get donated to and companies get held accountable. We've told you the reason why this isn't true is firstly that minorities actually get exploited because people only actually donate to them out of the fear of simply like being hated upon or people looking at them in a negative way, which is to say then minorities get donated to for selfish reasons. That's also to say then they get exploited. Note then there where they are exploited and we've told you structural reasons onto why charities are quite ineffective and why donating to charities, even if you do donate to them, doesn't solve the cost, because we've told you they are a band-aid solution. The way they allocate resources never actually fixes anything because they aren't addressing the root issue. They're just giving poor people some money, maybe some clothes. That doesn't actually help them, given the fact that that money can't buy them a house, that money can't buy them all their groceries, that money eventually runs out. Which is to say then, charities are only temporary or incredibly short term. On our side of the house, we got people that are actually advocating for these people, that use their own ethics to actually care about them as opposed to doing it simply for the PR incentives. We think that is incredibly bad. But next, I think in general, it also makes people quite prone to exploitation, wherein when you donate and you're quite selfless, then basically people are going to try to take advantage of you because you seem like a nice person. But note that our case here, and why we're able to beat them, is that we are actually able to prove selflessness doesn't exist and it actually stems from an act of selfishness, which is to say then we are able to oppose this narrative given that they say selfishness is incredibly bad. That's why we're able to beat them. Secondly, on the practical, why is this so important then? It's because, firstly, people are harmed. Know that these are minority communities that are often incredibly vulnerable and systematically oppressed. When they are lied to, and when you're telling them things that are incredibly wrong, and you're telling them, well, I'll fix all your issues for you, even though you don't, you make them lose out on hope, you make them lose out on the ability to actually better themselves because you don't give them things like education. The only thing you give to them is maybe a bit of money, but what are they supposed to do with that money? Absolutely nothing. Here, we get a strawman claim from opposition. I want to make this incredibly clear. We don't want everyone to be Princess Diana. We want people to be simply ethical instead of attempting to be a good person for PR and exploiting the poor. A lack of accountability on their side of the house occurs when there is a mask for people, when people like rich CEOs like Bill Gates, who wouldn't have fame and recognition if they didn't donate millions of dollars every year, when people like YouTubers like Mr. Beast donate money simply because it gets views and it gets attention. That is literally selfish intentions, which is to say selflessness in the act of it doesn't actually help people, and the margin of change is quite minimal, but instead is that it gets warped into selfishness wherein people buy into it and think these people are amazing people, when in reality they aren't. People are wearing rose-colored glasses. That is something we seek to prevent on side proposition. We want to better lives for minorities, we want to better lives for people in general, and make people experience feelings like empathy. It's on that basis we're incredibly proud to propose.
I thank the speaker for their fine remarks and all the debaters in the room for such a great and engaging debate. As you all know, this is a silent round. That means there will be no verdict, no oral adjudication. You'll get to know about the result post break announcement. So you're free to leave the meet now.
Thank you for the debate.
Thank you. Good round.
Thank you for the debate.
Abdullah, if possible, can you move to room 22, op/judge?
Okay.
Thank you.